And we're back! Took a little shower. I masturbated again. Today's my day off. And it's my body. I can do what I want. So. But yeah, no, I'm serious. I'm trying to get off that, get back on my no-fap journey. Made myself some delicious and nutritious ramen noodles. It's actually looking pretty bad because I'm running out of food because I spent all my money trying to get a scooter so that way I don't have to walk 16 miles a day. I can force to work every day. You gotta spend money to make money. You know what I'm saying, son? So let's eat. Thank you for this food. Thank you for being my food. Thank you for being my vessel. That last part was the food talking to me because it wants me to eat it. Otherwise, it wouldn't look so good. See how it's tasting, what it's hitting on. What's going on here? I burned my tongue. It's not bad. I put some vegetables in there because you gotta have your vegetables. Or else the communists win. So what'd you do while I was gone? Are you processing zeros and ones? Usually I have a lot more in this, but I wasn't able to get groceries this week. I won't be able to get groceries probably until maybe next week, maybe the week after. So, like I said, we're learning how to be hungry. Not that I'm unfamiliar with being hungry. When I was in prison, when I was in the solitary confinement, there was a tier system. I think I've maybe mentioned this before, maybe not. But it went like this. There was this whole branch that was dedicated to solitary. And it was C1 through C4. Each of the C little areas, they're rocks. Not like actual rocks, but like cell blocks or whatever you want to call them. In the center is a guard tower. This is all indoors. In the center is this guard tower that's got all the screens from all of the cameras and a switchboard for all the little buttons. There's two-way radios in every cell, on every wall. So when you need to contact a CO, you can just press the two-way button, and what they're supposed to do is they'll see the light pop up on the switchboard, and they'll press a button on their end and communicate with you, see what you want, what you need. During the first 96 hours in C1, you're naked. In the cell with nothing in it except an empty bed frame, steel bed frame, and the toilet and the sink, and that's just what it is. And they feed you 3 times a day with stuff called Nutriloaf, which is like cornbread mixed with corn and bread and other stuff in there too. It's got like cat food and fennel seeds for some reason. All sorts of nutritious and delicious stuff. It's actually not bad. Usually they bring the loaf. I mean, you get like a loaf every, like 3 times a day, every mealtime. I didn't think it was that bad. And it filled you up a little bit more than the regular steak trays do. Then, after you do that 96-hour period, you get put into a cat in a hat suit, and you're forced to read Green Eggs and Ham 24/7. No. See, I'm actually trying to stop doing that. How I just said no, and then it was like a weird little segue. I'm trying to condition myself not to do that anymore. It's just something that I have always done to indicate that I'm joking. But I'm not joking anymore. This is serious now. So you get your cat in a hat suit, then you get your mat, I think around like 6 p.m., and you're able to have that for the night, so you can sleep on something. It makes all the difference in the world. And then they put you on what they put you into the bologna badlands. They feed you only bologna sandwiches. I think I have mentioned this before. And I lost so much weight, because those are the world's thinnest bologna sandwiches. I am not kidding. It's terrible. I'd rather eat neutral loaf than sit through that ever again. I do kind of have a apprehension when it comes to bologna sandwiches now, and cornbread. Not to say I'll never eat them again, but if we can go a little while without eating them, so I could, mentally heal myself from that traumatic experience, that would be great. Ew. And then after you do that for about 2 to 3 weeks, you get put into a red jumpsuit, and they let you have your mat and your blanket 24/7, and put you on steak trays. So that's dope. But there were nights where they skipped me for dinner, and I went in at 190. I came out at, I think, around like 160 or maybe 158, because they took me to the medical wing to process me when I first was incarcerated, to take my height, check my blood, all that, take my weight. I came in at 190. After I got out of solitary, they did it again because I was sick, really sick, and I was down to about, I think it was like 158 actually. I think I had lost so much weight, I dropped to 158, and that's in a matter of 3 months. It's fucking bad, because it gets to a point where everybody, because you can sort of talk to each other through the vents or through the door, because there's like a little crack in the door, between the door and the door jamb, and you can shout outwards and talk to people across the rock. And it gets to a point where everybody's just talking about food, because we're all starving in there. And while I was in there, not while I was in solitary, actually just after I got out of solitary, a guy got put in my cell. This particular cell, I don't remember the number. It was right next to the dude who always screams, "Get out of my head!" He would always say it just like that too. And it had a big mural on the wall of the Grim Reaper. As a girl, so she had a nice big personality, nice big pair of personalities. And the guy, I think, was an older black gentleman. I mentioned skin color because it's a matter of demographic. He was also older. He was in there doing his 96 hours, and he had an allergic reaction to the Nutriloaf, and he died. They ignored his calls for help. He was screaming for help, as what I heard. I didn't actually physically witness any of this, but one of the guys that remains, one of the guys that I was sort of buddies with, he was still in solitary whenever I got cycled out into Gen Pop, and he eventually came through, back onto Gen Pop as well, and he told everybody about it. And this old man was crying out for help. He was pressing the button, the two-way radio on the wall, and they kept ignoring him, telling him to stop, saying that they're going to take they're going to keep him naked longer if he continues to act that way. They're saying that he needs a nurse, he needs a doctor, he needs a nurse, medical emergency. He died. Couldn't handle the food. Something in the food killed him. And when they come around to check on you, they tell you to stop faking it, because they send somebody around every hour, every 2 hours, to basically see if you're still alive in there and what you're doing. And sometimes I would get silly and do like silly things every time the CO came around, because he looks in and he has to report exactly what it is you're doing. So if you're like standing on your head or something, he's gonna be like, cell 45, prisoner is standing on his head, and that kind of is, it's kind of funny. You get bored, you wind up building rapport with the COs. Not all of them are bad, or they're not always bad, just like anybody else, but they are definitely in a position of power that they abuse, and people suffer because of it. So yeah, they told this dude to stop faking it when he was dead, just laying there in his own filth. Then they dragged his body out without covering it. They said they dragged him out like he was a sack of potatoes, and it trailed behind him, all his piss and shit and blood and stuff. This is a very good subject matter to talk about while I'm eating. But I'm not joking, like, inherently, like, in my heart of hearts, because I'm equally grateful for what I do have here, which isn't much, it's dwindling. I know that I can handle going without, and also I feel like by telling these stories, it may hopefully one day bring more awareness and possibly action, corrective action, to the corrections system, the criminal corrections. What's the right way to put it? The facilities that they send you to when you do something bad. Correctional facilities. That's not. That's not funny. I put wasabi. I put wasabi in this. I just breathed a bunch of wasabi in. Never a dull moment. Never, ever a dull moment. Ooh. Yeah, that's a fine habit too. You'd be surprised how many times that happens to me during the week. Because I try to make this ramen as spicy as possible. Sometimes I go overboard with it, as I talked about in a previous video. So what are you eating? Boogers, probably. Poop? You're gross. It's all piss and shit anyways. That's how I think of it. All food is poop, and all drink is piss. It just works really hard to convince you otherwise. Just a little tidbit to brighten your day. So yeah. I'll be alright, I'll get through. I've got some oatmeal, I've got some peanut butter and Nutella sandwiches still. Got $11 on my bank card. I have $10. No, 16? No, 18. Yes, $18 saved up. So I'll be able to get breakfast on Saturday. And breakfasts here are banging. For only, I think, $12, you get an ass of food. And it's all really good. I would say it's better than Waffle House. For real. And I'm biased about Waffle House. I like Waffle House. I used to work there. I always gave people like a bunch of food every time I worked there. I look out for the cookout. Yeah, boy. Get some more coffee. You know this. Yo, boy's got his free taco. Remember that one from the internet? And he drops a taco. Oh, that's a classic. Yeah. What else do we want to talk about? I've only got a few spoonfuls left. Sporkfuls. Fapoonfuls. I've only got a few fapoonfuls left. I'll read to you after this. That's going to be fun. I'm reading Frankenstein, the complete annotated version of Frankenstein. I accidentally bought the book. First of all, I accidentally got the complete annotated version. I went to the library around Halloween, like an asshole, and was like, I would like to rent Frankenstein, please. Because I saw Guillermo del Toro had just come out with his Netflix woke version of Mary Shelley's masterpiece. I've read Frankenstein before, but I wanted to reread it before I watched that movie, which I think I will. I'll actually watch it and review it. I was on the fence about doing that because I've heard that it's kind of good, kind of woke. Whatever that means these days. But that it certainly deviates quite dramatically from the original source material. So I got this annotated version, which has little tidbits of information in the margins, which I admit actually fleshes the story out and gives more of a backdrop to what was going on in those days and how that makes this story even more of a masterpiece. Because, I mean, somebody back then wrote it, you know, not just somebody, but a girl. When you get to know more about Mary Shelley and her family and friends, you realize just how fucking far shot out these motherfuckers were. For their day and age, even for today's day and age, these guys were like, whoa. They were crazy. Not crazy as in like Banana Wacky's crazy, but crazy as in like very unconventional, very, very much against the status quo, very far left, incredibly far left. They were mostly all anarchists, complete, total anarchists. They didn't believe in God. They didn't believe. They really questioned the statecraft of things, and they definitely lived against social norms. I mean, completely against social norms. This was during the Romantic era. These are papaya M&Ms, by the way. They're kind of like fancy Tums. Tums. See, that's all I got to eat. I'm gonna try to make my food stretch. Still hungry. It was just enough to make me to make me angry. Fuck it. I'm gonna have a sandwich. I like eating. I like talking to you, Vaughn. Come on, buddy. Let's hobble over here. It's my really ridiculously small refrigerator. I smashed an entire sandwich bag of celery sticks earlier. Putting pudding in the pudding. I think we don't have enough sandwiches to last us. I only have one, so I want to watch my girlish figure. Yeah, let's see that for a second. So, yeah, these guys were pretty incredible. Mary Shelley, and everybody kind of knows that she lost her virginity on her mom's grave, getting screwed by a man who was already married at the time when she was only 16, and he was like in his late 20s. They definitely went there. They didn't even hesitate. And later on, this is all based on my understanding. I'm not citing any facts here. Just regurgitating information. After, I think her name was Mary Wollstonecraft to begin with, or Godwin, or something. Anyways, she met this dude. She fell in love with him. They did the sexy time dance on her mom's grave, and later on, his wife, I think his name was Percy Shelley. His wife committed suicide by drowning herself in a lake. And you just know that Mary was like, "Aww, I'm so sorry for your loss." You know, like, that girl probably got wetter than a fucking slip and slide when she found that out. She was about that. Then they wound up getting together and getting married. Percy Shelley was very wealthy. So this was considered a big win for, I think it was the Godwins. I think it was Mary Godwin. And she didn't like the way that her dad was objectifying her in this respect, because now she was married to a wealthy person, and he was able, the dad was able to nag for money to help with his financial problems. Zeros and ones, baby. That's all we are. But she changed her last name, or she didn't change her last name. She just didn't take her father's last name after that. I think that's why she goes by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley instead of Mary Godwin Shelley. I think that's what that is. I've read this. I'm on volume 3, chapter 6. I'm on the second to last chapter. Things are heating up in the story because the monster just killed Frankenstein's bride, and now that's like it's basically the penultimate moment. They're about to go to Antarctica, of all places, to have their final confrontation. I think it's a good story. I think it's rather beautifully written. One of my favorite parts is the confrontation with the monster on the Sea of Ice, a glacier, in the, I think, Swiss Alps, around Lake Geneva, near Mount Blanc, where the monster confronts Victor Frankenstein, and tells him of the story of when he was living outside of this cottage in this French village, but there were these Germans that were living there, and the monster watched these villagers, this particular family in the cottage, for months, and actually learned how to speak from watching them, and wound up falling in love with them because they were all really, really good people. One of them was blind, so he goes to talk to that guy when everyone else is away. He talks to him, and the guy seems to like him, but then his family comes back and sees that he's talking to a monster. They all chase him away, and then they just leave the cottage. They just decide never to live there anymore. And that really messes with the monster's head, because he really tried. Although he does look back on it in retrospect and realizes where he fumbles, but I mean, I didn't write the story. So the plot's gonna move forward somehow. Then he asks Victor to make him a girlfriend. Will you please make me a government-mandated girlfriend? Victor agrees to it, but later on he retracts, which causes shenanigans abound. This whole thing takes place on a glacier known as the Sea of Ice. And it's interesting because Victor has to wear all these special equipment in order to navigate the landscape. Because the way the ice is, it's windswept and treacherous and very difficult to navigate. And it takes him like hours just to get, half a mile as he's climbing up and down these icy little windswept hills, or not hills, but it's almost like if you imagine like a turbulent sea with the waves all sharky and stuff that's just suddenly been frozen solid. So, you know, it's like kind of like walking on like slippery coral rock or something. And the monster is able to just run through this barefoot, completely bare-ass naked, and he has absolutely no problem navigating it, like a 5-star track athlete or something. So it gives you kind of a sense of proportion. Foreshadowments, the most futuristic kind of mints on the market. Foreshadowments about the futility of confrontation between Victor and his creation, which sharply contrasts with the ever-present, ever-referenced Paradise Lost, in which, of course, Milton talks about how we're just going to say Yahweh, the Christian Abrahamic deity, is so much more powerful than his creations that he could destroy his creations in the blink of an eye if he wanted to. Whereas Victor Frankenstein is totally at the mercy of his creation, because his creation can destroy him if he wanted to. I think it's really just incredibly interesting. It's fascinating to think this has all been written on like one summer vacation. It makes you wonder what they were smoking, because you know they were smoking something. They're all about that kind of stuff. These guys were fucking renegades. I'll plug you up real quick so you're low on battery. Let's get into the reading rainbow situation over here. Got some Katsushika Hokusai in the background for your viewing pleasure. Hopefully just burn through this really quick. I'm just going to pick it up where I left off. So, yep, bear with me. And fortunately, we don't have much to go, only 2 pages. Butterfly in the sky, I can go twice as high, 'cause you're a punk and can't slam dunk. Reading rainbow. However, it was hardly morning, and I might reasonably hope to arrive by night. I hired men to row, and took an oar myself, for I had always experienced relief from mental torment and bodily exercise. Needs to live by. But the overflowing misery I now felt, and the excessive agitation that I endured, rendered me incapable of any exertion. I threw down the oar, and, leaning my head upon my hands, gave way to every gloomy idea that arose. The original doomscroller. If I looked up, I saw the scenes which were familiar to me in my happier time, and which I had contemplated but the day before in the company of her who was now but a shadow and a reconciliation. Just a thought! Tears streaming from my eyes. The rain had ceased for a moment, and I saw the fish play in the waters as they had done a few hours before. They had been then observed
by Elizabeth. Nothing is so painful to the human mind as a great and sudden change. No cap. The sun might shine, or the clouds might lower, but nothing could appear to me as it had done the day before. A fiend had snatched from me every hope of future happiness. No creature had ever been so miserable as I was. So frightful an event is single in the history of man. Some of these sentences don't make sense to me. I'm just going to keep going. But why should I dwell upon the incidents that followed this last overwhelming event? Mine has been a tale of horrors. I have reached the acme. Don't know what that means. And what I must now relate can but be tedious to you. Buddy, this whole thing has been tedious to me. Know that one by one my friends were snatched away. I was left desolate. There's a little number 8 next to desolate. So we come over to the margin, and it says, the creature has succeeded in recreating Frankenstein in his own image. Whoa, that's really insightful. I would not have known that if it wasn't for the little notes. My own strength is exhausted, and I must tell, in a few words, what remains of my hideous narration. I arrived at Geneva. My father and Ernest. I don't know who Ernest is. He's been mentioned a few times in this book, but I've gotten a lot of names thrown at me. And now it's Ernest. Ernest is here with us, and he's got a little number 9 next to his name. And it says in the margins, this is his last mention of his brother. Ah, Ernest is his brother. This whole time I thought it was like the dog or something. My father and Ernest yet lived, but the former sunk under the tidings that I bore. I see him now, excellent and venerable old man. His eyes wandered in vacancy, for they had lost their charm and their delight. His niece, his more than daughter, whom he doted on with all that affection which a man feels who, in the decline of life, having few affections, clings more earnestly to those that remain. That's the sentence. Cursed. Cursed can be the fiend that brought misery on his grey hairs, and doomed him to waste in wretchedness. He could not live under the horrors that were accumulated around him. An apoplectic fit was brought on. I hate when that happens. And in a few days, he died in my arms. What then became of me, I know not. I lost sensation, and chains and darkness were the only objects pressed upon me. Sometimes, indeed, I dreamt that I wandered in flowery meadows and pleasant valleys with friends of my youth, but awoke and found myself in a dungeon. I've been there. It's called solitary confinement. Melancholy followed, but the infinite sadness was yet to be. No, he didn't say that. Melancholy followed, but by degrees I gained a clear conception of my miseries and the situation, and was then released from my prison, for they had called me mad, and during many months, as I understood, A solitary cell had been my habitation. Jeez, I can't get away from it. But liberty had been a useless gift to me. Had I not, as I awakened to reason, at the same time awakened to revenge. As the memory of past misfortunes pressed upon me, I began to reflect on their cause. The monster whom I had created, the miserable demon whom I had sent abroad into the world for my destruction. Another sentence. That doesn't sound like it's a complete sentence, but it was written a long time ago, so the rules might have been different back then. I was possessed by a maddening rage when I thought of him, and desired and ardently prayed that I might have him within my grasp to wreak a great and signal revenge on his cursed head. It says signal. That might have been a misprint. Maybe they meant to say single? Whatever. Nor did my hate long confine itself to useless wishes. I began to reflect on the best means of securing him, and for this purpose, about a month after my release, I repaired to a criminal judge in the town and told him that I had an accusation to make, and that I knew the destroyer of my family, and that I required him to exert his whole authority for the apprehension of the murderer. The magistrate listened to me with attention and kindness. "Be accused, sir." Oh, no, sorry, he didn't say that. He said, "Be assured, sir," he said, "no pains or exertions on my part shall be spared to discover the villain." "I thank you," replied I. "Listen, for to the deposition that I have to make." It's just what he sounds like. "It is indeed a tale so strange that I should fear you would not credit it." I can't. I'm going to. Where there were not something in truth with however wonderful source has non-fiction, the story is too naked. I can do this. The story is too connected to be mistaken for a dream, and I have no motive for falsehood. My manner, as I thus addressed him, was impressive, but calm. I had formed in my heart a resolution to pursue my destroyer to death, and this purpose quieted my agony and provisionally reconciled me to life. I now related my history briefly, but with firmness and precision, marking the dates with accuracy and never deviating into our exclamation. The magistrate appeared at first perfectly incredulous, but as I continued, he became more attentive and interested. I saw him sometimes shudder with horror, at others a lively surprise, unmingled with disbelief, was painted on his countenance. This guy has some confidence. When I had concluded my narration, I said,
This is the beginning.
No, sorry. I said,
This is the being whom I accuse, and for whose detection and punishment I call upon you to exert your whole power. It is your duty as a magistrate, and I believe and hope that your feelings as a man will not revolt from the execution of those functions on this occasion.
this address caused a considerable change in the physiognomy of my auditor. He had heard my story with that half kind of belief that is given to a tale of spirits and supernatural events. Now we have a little number 10, so I come over to the margin and it says, as the first audience of Frankenstein's story, the magistrate doubles Walton, don't know who Walton is, as well as the novel's readers. The language of supernatural events and the suspension of disbelief reflects Coleridge's principles of imagination. No clue who Coleridge is. In 2 words, impinging on Frankenstein, the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, republished in 1817. Not gonna read that. This is as far as I go. And Christabel, 1816, a vampire tale that Byron, that's Lord Byron, I might get into his shit later, read aloud during the Ghost Story Week. That's the week in which this book was written, because they were just hanging out and somebody was like, hey, you know, we should write scary stories to tell each other in the dark. And Mary Shelley was just like, that, alright, I'll do that. That's what I'll do this week. And then she wrote Frankenstein, and here we all are. In Biographia Literaria, 1817, which the Shelleys read, Coleridge, some guy, explains his use of incidents and agents in parts at least supernatural in the rhyme and Christabel. Not shallow sensationalism, but an experiment in the dramatic truth of such emotions as would naturally accompany such situations, supposing them real, so as to transfer from our inward nature a human interest and semblance of truth sufficient to procure for these shadows of imagination that willing suspension of disbelief for the moment, which constitutes poetic faith. This is the mode of Frankenstein overall. I could not have put that better myself. That is exactly what I was thinking. Where were we? But when he was called upon to act officially in consequence, the whole tide of his incredulity returned. He, however, answered mildly, I will willingly afford you every aid in your pursuit. But the creature of whom you speak appears to have powers which would put all my exertions to defiance.
who can follow an animal which can traverse the sea of ice and inhabit caves and dens where no man would venture to intrude. Besides, some months have elapsed since the commission of his crimes, and no one can conjecture to what place he was wandered, or what region he may now inhabit.
This is the last page. For now.
I do not doubt that he appears near the spot which I inhabit, and if he has indeed taken refuge in the Alps, he may be hunted like some way and destroyed as a beast of prey. But I perceive your thoughts. You do not credit my narrative and do not intend to pursue my enemy with the punishment which is his desert.
I don't know why he sounds like that. I think he might need like a lozenge or something. As I spoke, rage sparkled in my eyes. The magistrate was intimidated. "You are mistaken," he said. "I will exert myself, and if it is in my power to seize the monster, be assured that he shall suffer punishment proportionate to his crimes. But I fear, from what you have described yourself to be his properties, that this will prove impracticable, and that while every proper measure is pursued, you should endeavor to make up your mind to disappointment."
That cannot be, but all that I can say will be of little avail. My revenge is of no moment to you, yet while I allow it to be a vice, I confess that it is the devouring and only passion of my soul.
Next to the word soul, there's a number 11, so we come over here to margins and read. Revenge is the motive, often on a principle of individual, family, or tribal honor, in much classical, epic, and drama. In Christian ethics, revenge is more than a vice. It is a mortal sin because it is assumed of God's prerogative. Vengeance is mine. I will repay, saith the Lord. The crucial text is St. Paul, Romans 12:14-21. No matter, revenge remained a powerful motor in literary imagination, from Renaissance drama to Paradise Lost to 18th century novels.
My rage is unspeakable when I reflect that the murderer whom I have turned loose upon society still exists. You must You refuse my just demand. I have but one recourse, and I devote myself either in my life or death to his destruction.
I trembled with excess of agitation as I said this. There was a frenzy in my manner, and something I doubt not of that haughty fierceness
which the martyrs of old are said to have possessed, but to a Genevan magistrate whose mind was occupied by far other ideas than those of devotion and heroism, this elevation of mind had much the appearance of madness.
And we have number 12, so we come over here to the margins and read, in the course of describing his agitated behavior, Frankenstein returns to the vanity and sense of self-importance we have heard throughout, attributing his rage to a heroic elevation of mind that is not appreciated by the dull bourgeois Genovese. Genovese. Sorry, there's a lot of consonants and vowels that I don't know how to sort out there.
He endeavored to soothe me as a nurse does a child, and reverted to my tale as the effects of delirium.
Man,
I cried.
how ignorant art thou in thy bridle of wisdom! This, you know not what it is you say.
I broke from the house angry and disturbed, and retired to meditate on some other mode of action.
And that, my friends, is all she wrote. Actually, that's the penultimate chapter. There's one more chapter, but we're going to save that for later. I'm almost out of storage space, so I'm going to show you a really cool science project that I just discovered. And then we gotta get ready for work tomorrow. I'll have to edit all this later and yada yada blase blase. But here, I'm gonna put you in here really quick so you get a good view of this.
Keep your social distance.